Good evening, everybody. This is Sean VanGordon, Mayor of Springfield, and I'm coming to you from the conference room from Roseboro Lumber. So thank you to Roseboro Lumber for providing the facilities for us to have this conversation today. We're going to go through a couple of quick updates, and then we got a couple of people in the room, and we'll open it up for Q&A and answer folks' question. Big things that are on my mind. We were actually just chatting about this in the room before we started. Tomorrow night, Team Springfield's meeting, which is the jurisdictions between Willamette Lane, the city of Springfield, the school district, and Springfield Utility Board, which is the first time since the pandemic we've all gotten into a room together and talked about updates and where we needed to go as a city. So I'm pretty excited about that. And also, if you're marking your calendar at home, City Halloween is coming back starting at 3:30 on Monday the 31st. No city council that day. The city hall is going to be full of kids trick-or-treating and having a great time. Rumor has it there may be a fire truck down there, so make sure you bring your kids along. Two other things that I think are really important to talk about. Really, the police levy. So that's measure 2327 that is on your ballot. That is the renewal of our 5-year police levy. We've had that since 2002, so we've renewed it quite a few times since then. It funds a third of the police department. It's $1.40 per thousand, which effectively means that it's the same rate that we paid the last 5 years. When people talk about Springfield and they talk about that sense of how safety leads to that sense of community, it really is because of the work that comes from this police levy. And what you really do is you really do see it in the reduction in our crime rate over that time period. So I would ask that you make sure you vote. Please vote for that police levy. It does a lot to make sure we have the right patrol, that we fund the jail, and that we have the right sort of community support staff if something happens in your neighborhood. The other thing I want to give a quick update for is the road bond that the voters passed in 2018. All of those projects are done, which makes me really excited. We as a community, our roads need a ton of work, and voters put their faith in the city to make sure that they get that $10 million investment done. And we've effectively done all those road projects. You see it on 42nd Street, you see it on Mohawk, you see it out in High Banks and Thurston. Any place that we've invested, those roads look absolutely beautiful. So thank you for your support, and thank you for the city staff that made sure that got done. With that, we're going to open this up for questions, and then since I've got folks in the room with me, for people in the room, they're going to ask me the question. I'm going to repeat the question for the recording, and then answer it. So,
Mayor VanGordon, good evening. My name is Joe Cotley. I'm the owner of McKinsey Glass, and today I just wanted to check with you on the status of the Main Street Safety Project that was designed with the idea of constructing 9 roundabouts, raised median, and additional right-of-way taking from businesses up and down Main Street. I know back in May, you and the city council had rejected that proposal. And I was very proud of you for making that decision. That was not an easy decision, but we're supposed to go back, I understand, to the drawing board and come up with a plan that's supposed to be transparent and take the business community interest as well this time around. So just want to know that if you're reelected mayor for another term, I just want to know, are you going to stand firm by that decision, or what could we expect?
Yeah, so the question from Joe Cotley from McKinsey Glass was really an update around the Main Street project. That was the project that we had that was originally had 9 roundabouts and about 3 miles of median in the mix. And so effectively what has happened is that in May, the city council said we do not effectively kill that project, that plan, right? So that plan is dead. Now, what we do from here, our original plan was to really come back and have some listening sessions that were into the summer. Now, we didn't have enough staff to do that. And so as we've gotten people hired, those are going to get scheduled out here probably in 23, so that we can start those conversations. My commitment to the community was to really have the listening sessions and use that as the basis for how we move forward. So what I want people to know is that the safety plan, whatever term you want to use for it, is a blank sheet of paper right now. We know for sure that we are not doing the 9 roundabouts. And we know for sure that we're not going to put sort of ink to the paper until we have the listening sessions that we committed to. Now, where I think we're going to end up is somewhere in the, realm of keeping Main Street effectively into its, into its footprint it is today. Talking about the important, when I listen to folks, I hear the importance of getting clear on what does the safety data even mean, right? And really having a conversation with folks about, like, when I talk to businesses, some people, like, they need a crosswalk. Some people are like, hey, I'm good, right? And some people are, some people have said, hey, I need a turn lane. Is asking people for that next 5 years worth of work that we're going to do. Ultimately, I want to get to a place, if we can get to a place that we can put our hands in the middle and we, and sort of say, this is the certainty that agreeing on a plan would bring. I think that takes everybody's stress down. So the short answer is yes, we're going to do exactly what we committed to doing.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Just a quick follow-up
Sure.
on that. So my name is Jeff Wayne. I own the Finish Line Car Wash down at 41st and Main. Along with Joe and several others, I was part of the strategic advisory committee for the Main Street project, and that was a disappointing exercise, because the idea, and you mentioned we want to have listening sessions and whatnot, and when we kind of heard the same thing when we started the advisory committee, that hey, we want your input, we're here to listen to the business community and whatnot. And there really was a predetermined agenda that we would not listen to. So I don't know if you can address that at all, but is it going to be a transparent process? I think is what I think.
Yeah, and that's right. The process that we had before was effectively something that ODOT ran, and I'm not sort of putting this as responsibility on ODOT, but and I think one of the things that I saw from it is processes that had 1 foot, like 1 foot before the pandemic and 1 foot after the pandemic, really needed to go way back and redo a bunch of work that is was in that conversation. The pandemic really caused people to sort of lose the thread because you're not in the room with people. Follow-up becomes a little harder. But I think the answer to your question is, like, if my goal ultimately is to get to something that we're all collectively can get behind, right? Because when I look through this, and how many times we've done this with this, with the business community, right? Like, we've been through this like 3 times, right? And then, when I talk to you guys, it's like there's always that shoe hanging out there that somebody's going to come up with another plan, right? And I want to, if we can get to something, we kind of lock everybody into this is how we go forward. I don't know what happened with the details of what happened with the previous process. I just don't have enough information to comment on it. But I think knowing that that the piece of paper is blank, right? Knowing that we've got to take advantage of all the work that we've done already to understand its impact, and knowing that we effectively want to keep the corridor, right, the same size, should give people some certainty that we're going to have a decent conversation about it, and figure out where do we want to go, right? Like, everybody wants Main Street to be successful.
Thanks, appreciate it.
You guys brought out the tough ones.
It's important.
No, and the important thing is, I think it's going to take time, right? Knowing that when we talked about it in May, right, we were talking about voting in February. Well, we haven't done anything, right? So knowing that it's a blank piece of paper and then we're going to start the conversation in, I don't know, January or February means we're probably not voting in February. It's probably going to just take a while longer than that.
Have you hired new planners, by the way?
Yes, we have.
Yeah, so I think there's 5.
Correct.
So, and this has actually been kind of an interesting, experience is the city's brought on 5 new planners. And, one of the things we sort of announced and, was that the planning desk closed on Friday for a while. And people are like, well, why did the planning desk close on Friday? Well, we brought 5 new planners on, and I was actually kind of proud of how the staff kind of approached it, because they looked at the lowest volume day that they had and said, with so many new people coming on, right, we probably need to get in a room, right, like do all the, go through all the material, right, make sure that everybody's on the same page, make sure that we're sort of getting, the level of service and consistency, and right, like everybody's sort of trained. So I always kind of imagine, if you go in there on Friday, the Rocky theme's playing as they go through all the, as they go through all the work for the week. But that's in the planning department, that's a lot of people.
Good. Progress.
Yep. Well, hopefully we'll get some more things built, especially in,
In your downtown, would be good, yeah.
yes, exactly. Let's see if we have. Oh, we have had some attendees join. If you are an attendee and you want to ask a question, we didn't even go through those rules. You can use the Q&A, or you can raise your hand and we'll get your question asked. So let's talk just briefly about Glenwood, because everybody's always really excited to hear about that. So right now you've got a couple of things happening that are important. One of them is that the county commissions actually, put it into their work plan to explore what does it mean to close the transfer site. We've talked about this as a community for years, about that piece of property. I don't know the timing on it. I don't know how long it's going to take, but to actually see it in a board order about, for Glenwood is actually, brand new information, and what is going to help give context to, where that land is and how valuable the piece of land the county owns is. The other piece that people talk about a lot is the North Riverfront property. They call it the North Glenwood property. That's the relatively large piece of property the city owns. We do have a developer for, that is in there. We're probably really close to getting a master planner and to work with, the 2 other big property owners to actually build a concept about what do we actually want to do with that piece of property, and then how do we execute on that plan. So if you think about development in the city, that the Glenwood property is one of the hardest things we're ever going to do. It's going to be the most rewarding thing that we've ever done. And realistically, we're probably 5 years away from, moving dirt out on that piece of property. So what I would ask is people stay patient, they stay engaged as we have conversations about it, and, talk about, what else do we want to do with that piece of property? I know that there's a lot of developers in Glenwood that work is moving on in other directions, that not necessarily free to share everybody's details, but know that when I look across the city, we've had a great permit year. We've got a lot of building projects that have started, everything from the work out in Marcola Meadows, all the way to what we see in downtown, all the way into the middle part of the city. And we're seeing the Mohawk district fill up quite a bit. So there's still a lot of building activity that is out there. We just need to continue to monitor it. And, there's a lot of economic uncertainty, but we want to continue to see business succeed here in Springfield.
Mayor, we had 2,500 building permits last year and about 1,100 plan reviews so far in 2022.
So if you can't hear it in the recording, it's 2,500 building permits last year, which is a good building year for us, for our city.
That's in 21 you're talking about, right? Which was the highest cost build that was for decades. So
Yeah. All right. What other questions do you guys have? This is sort of an exercise in stamina. Ask all the questions that people have on their minds, and then we can wrap it up and let everybody get home. All right.
I mean, I don't want to hide anything in case other people have questions, but from our vantage point, I'm in the construction world with our glass company, and I do kind of have a dismal outlook for next year as far as the economic environment, because we see a lot of projects come onto the exchange for bids, and I have to say there's been very, very little, if any, new projects to bid on. So economic activities for building construction, I see that next year is going to be a little bit of a challenge. We still have work booked all the way into next year, but that pipeline gets empty. I don't know what you guys are seeing. I'm encouraged to hear about that's actually kind of old data for previous years. I don't know what we're seeing for these current times.
So the thing I'm worried about economically is the Fed's interest rates and the combination of that and the inflation rate not being able to come down, right? So that impacts everything from our businesses to people trying to get a mortgage. And so I don't, if you think 3 months out, right? Like I think, like you said, there's a lot of there's a lot of economic activity already booked, right? People have projects 90% of the way, they're going to finish those. There's a lot of uncertainty, I think, when it comes into 23. I don't know what that's going to bring. I'm concerned about it too, right? Everything from our supply chains to how we export, what we export, from finished products, right? Like, people just don't know, and I think being sensitive to that is going to become important. Going through recessions is really challenging, obviously, on the business front. As a city, city governments tend to be the last to come out of it, right? Because, the work that people have booked kind of carry you into it, and then you see the impact, and then you sort of come out of it. And what I kind of tell people when it comes to economic uncertainty is a couple of things, right? Like, there's only so many things we can control. And then as a city, right, and as an elected body, we need to get our arms around whatever we do to drive certainty into the conversation, and whatever that means, right? So that means, do we get, clear on projects? How do we move forward for everything the city can do so that when economic activity picks up, that somebody can take the ball and go to the next step, right? Is sort of just keep focus on moving forward. The other thing that I think is probably important economically is whatever happens with the state legislature, right? We're 1 week away from having the election results with us, right? And knowing what that legislative agenda is going to be critical. And knowing how we lobby to make Oregon more economically competitive is going to become really important. And there's a lot of big questions that are sitting at the legislature, all the way from Measure 110, which is the thing that is decriminalized drugs in the street, all the way through to that, from that point all the way to what does the state do around its climate friendly and equitable communities climate rules. I think it is going to be a huge legislative session that we just have to be conscientious of. So when I think of how do we position the city, right? I'm looking for places that, places that we can partner with, business groups and places that are going to invest to create jobs here locally. And I'm also looking for places where maybe we don't know the answer, but but we can start having the conversation about problems or sort of headwinds that the legislature is either creating or can help address to make sure that we're at as strong as a position as possible. That's a lot. That's what happens when you're asking an economist what's coming up. Well, on one hand, this, on the other hand, this. But right, like I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah.
The real danger area would be high prices and slow growth, right? Like I'm too young to have experienced that, but I definitely don't hope we don't end up in that group for stagflation.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any conversation or any future conversations you think that are gonna happen with the city and Springfield Utility Board to upgrade downtown's power?
It's interesting that you would have brought that up. There's a downtown power plan that the utility board is that they're sort of working on, a sort of strategic plan. My guess is we're going to see them talk to us about it in November when we have an annual meeting with the utility board. I think that's going to be a topic of conversation. In downtown, one of the things that is sort of holding us back, for lack of a better word, is that we can't grow much further than we already are because of the lack of availability of electrical infrastructure. So being able to have that conversation about, okay, well, hey, how are we gonna get the infrastructure in there so that we can get to the next layer of downtown investments going to become really important. And more broadly, the thing that I consistently have told the utility board is that they're a big driver in economic development. Having affordable utilities, the infrastructure in place, I would love to see them get to a little bit more longer view of how they deal with electrical infrastructure and in this entire city. That's been a position I've lobbied with them for about the last year, is to really kind of get a long range plan together and figure out what gaps they have and make sure that if somebody has a piece of property, they know what they can do with it, right? That's our part. They have the roads and the wastewater and the stormwater there so they could build something, and that they have the utilities sitting there so that they can invest in this community. That's going to take a long conversation with them.
On lines of the infrastructure, so the Feds passed a massive infrastructure bill. Does any of that trickle down to actually city of Springfield? How do you get that money? I mean, do you have any in the pipeline?
So most of the money there's a couple different buckets of it, right? Most of the money comes through the same way that our federal dollars come through, which comes through with something called MPC, or you might hear it called the MPO, right? The Metropolitan Planning Organization. And that's just really a fancy name for, hey, all the agencies get together in big urban areas and talk about what do you do with the federal dollars. Now, when those dollars show up, right, there's already a pre-approved sort of list of projects that each jurisdiction sort of puts, raises their hand and says, hey, yes, right, like we're interested in that. Here's what we do. So there's one bucket of federal dollars that we see, and we see more money come into this MPO, this federal body, right? And normally Springfield gets, I don't know, maybe 12, maybe $15 million in a 3-year cycle, somewhere around there. That might be a little bit high. And then there's state dollars where ODOT's going to get more additional money through its grant programs that will be available for us to go out and get and lobby for and talk about, at the state level. So and then there's a bunch of other small sort of buckets that deal with other parts of, infrastructure and climate mitigation and things like that. So with the state, really what I want to see us do is just get as much infrastructure money as possible, right? Because our need list across this community is relatively large. But we're seeing some of those dollars come in, some of these other programs already through just more money than we usually have, if that makes sense. The two big things that I get asked about roads in Springfield are 42nd Street and Mill Street. I know, everybody's looking around here saying that they're surprised about this, right? And in 42nd Street, Mill Street's the easier one, right? It's got federal dollars. We committed to doing it in the 2018 bond, right? Because we told the community, hey, this thing's going to get done. through a different source. It's in flight. They're doing the public outreach now. The pandemic just slowed everything down. Keep your fingers crossed. I hear 24. I'm getting nods from the city staff. I hear 24. Maybe at a place that we're breaking ground. 42nd Street's the harder one, right? Like the road's terrible, except for the part we fixed under the bond. But the big thing I would expect people to see is there's a giant levee there that's got to be replaced. And then there's the road that's got to be fixed. And until we fix the levee, which keeps us all from having to buy flood insurance, right? We can't actually, we're not going to actually be able to work on the road. So that's probably going to take another couple of years of you hearing me say the 42nd Street levee, the 42nd Street levee. But ultimately, the big flood protection thing we have, we got to get an answer from the feds about that, and then come back and fix the road. You didn't know I'd bring lots of facts. It is the 42nd Street levee is probably going to involve community partners from EWEB to the school district to Willamette Lane. They have property out there to International Paper to the state. Like when that fully develops into an actual plan, it is going to be a monster project. All right. Any other questions that you guys are just interested to know about?
You guys asked my questions.
Do you have one more, Joe, or you want me to wrap up here?
Well, I got to talk a little bit about the public safety, homelessness, that sort of stuff. I mean, I have to say, we don't have the problem in our city that other cities contend with. As of late, this last year, I've seen some, aspects of it starting to creep up. I'm sure you guys are aware of it. But, I try and do my part with my properties to try and keep that element out of there. But are we doing something different that all of a sudden start to appear, or what's the pressure, or how's that happening? How are we dealing with it?
So the question really is around homelessness or unhoused folks that are that are across the city, and there's additional and seeing sort of additional challenges or more total folks on the street, which I think this is a really good question, because there's parts of it that are really easy, and then there's sort of parts of it that are a little bit more difficult. The city of Springfield's not doing anything different than it has in the past. I think what's happening is we're sort of moving past the sort of pandemic sort of stage, and we're collectively sort of seeing the problem that's sort of been under the surface a little bit more. There's a mayor's task force that's going to lobby for additional dollars to support cities and how they address the unhoused. And I think you've got to take a kind of a multiple phase approach, right? Like one of the things we just did at council was we did approve where the Egan site was going to go. Well, we did the first half, we've got to do the second half later. But like the community can get around the fact that nobody should freeze to death, right? Like, when it gets below freezing, we need to have a place for people to go where they can be safe and warm for the evening. I think there's a big question that relates to, decriminalization of drugs that is out there, mental health. We've invested more in cahoots than we ever have. And I think we started a conversation to have a drug court to sort of defer, right, to get people to, push people into treatment where we can, so that they can actually get more help. The other thing I'd like to see us do is really start like one of the challenge areas that we have is right around like 5th and like South A-ish, right? It's in UP property, right? We've got folks in that we need to work with to get areas cleaned up in the city. The railroad's always a challenge to work with. I'm using them as an example. Former Mayor Lycan always told this story, like there's God, the railroad, and then everybody else.
It's my experience.
Yeah. So I think what we're gonna see is challenge it, a time, and we gotta get, group, kind of a work group together to sort of address problems that we have on individual properties so that we, deal with, trash, we deal with, we deal with any sort of crime issues, we get people coordinated and sort of connected with the right people that are gonna actually help. And we just take it one step at a time, because most things in communities are designed to work by bureaucracies, right? Like if it's a pothole, like we know we got to call public works. If it's a PD issue, we know we've got to call the PD. This homeless problems are really work across that. Really, you need to get a lot of different people into the room because they're impacted. Some of them are private business owners, right? Some of them are, people who provide services to the unhoused and will help get them housed, right? But you got to have kind of a left to right conversation opposed to an up and down conversation. So I would tell you, be patient. We are lobbying at the state level for additional resources to help address folks, and get, sort of get people the help we need and get the problem areas sort of cleaned up. And, and make sure you say something if there's a, if there's an issue. And I don't mean just say, I'm not telling you to call the PD, but like, you can email the city. If, you see a challenge, a challenging issue, you just over communicate what's actually going on, because it is a huge issue across Lund County right now. And I've got conversations with other mayors coming up to go, okay, how do we get our arms around this? I will call out a couple of great service providers here that do a lot of fantastic work, right? Cahoots does a lot of great work on the street every single day. Catholic Community Services does a lot of great work. We don't talk enough about the fact we probably have 600 kids that are sleeping on couches in Springfield School District that are, in unsafe housing situations that, like the G Street Oasis is designed to help, the McKinney-Vento folks are designed to help. So we have to sort of attack this problems on multiple fronts, right? If it's drugs and crime and, people doing unsafe things, we got to deal with it that way. And we got to get people the help they need.
A complex problem for sure. It's not an easy one to solve. I do have some ideas, though someday we can talk about it.
Yes. Well, perfect.
Do you have one question
Oh,
online? You can see it there.
let's see if we got it. Oh, okay. So I'm going to read the online question. Thanks, Veronica. What is the best way for community members to stay informed or get involved with ongoing projects? There's a couple of ways. Following the city on social media is a great way. So you want to go through and follow the city of Springfield, the fire department, the library, the police department, and MWMC, the Metropolitan Wastewater Commission. So that's a good step. And if you go on to City Hall, you can find a list on the news, I believe in the newsroom, that has all the email lists that we have available that you can get signed up for. So that covers your Main Street safety projects, your Mill Street projects, and the city's always sort of creating mail lists to send out more information. You can contact your elected officials, including your county commissioner. That we always love to talk about what's going on, or you can just read, like, one easy way is to tune in to a city council meeting. You can catch them on YouTube. So there's lots of ways. All right, folks. Well, I appreciate the time. We're going to post this online as soon as we get, to that point where we've got the video, and then we'll probably do this in May or June again after State of the City. So thank you, everybody. Have a good night.